Welcome back to CodeWithKamira, and today we are going to look at the core folder or core directory, and inside it we shall look at the network directory. And in the network directory we can create some packages. We shall need a directory we call retrofit. Here we shall be setting up our retrofit instance and calls, and then we could have network responses, So let's go direct into retrofit, whereby we shall need to create some files. The first one should be APIs, and another one should be ApiClient. And another one should be API service. So before we can go further, we need to install the dependencies. Flutter pub add retrofit. So Flutter pub add -- Flutter pub add -- dev retrofit generator. Let's check if it is installed. That's a dev dependency. So, and retrofit is here, but retrofit generator, yes, it's here. Then we shall need a build runner. Build runner should be a dev dependency, so it should be Flutter pub add build runner, but this should be -- dev. Flutter pub add JSON serializable. Flutter pub add JSON annotation. Flutter pub add new. Those are the dependencies. In our APIs, we shall define the various APIs. So we say class API. Okay. We make it a private constructor. So API, this one. Now we define our APIs. We will need a static const base URL equals, this is our base URL. So we have static const users, which is users, but I prefer to remove this, make it open, and then I put it here. We do like that. Static const user, we call it user, and it shall be / users then the ID of the user. This should give us an individual user. Then we shall have post the user should be static, const add user, and it shall be users add. Put it inside. Static const products, and this shall be products. Give us a list of products. We can have static const product. This should give us a single product, so it is products. Then the ID. As the path variable. Static const product categories. That is categories. Okay. Products, product categories. Which is products, then categories. Static post cuts, and that shall be cuts. Static post cut. So cut, the one with the cut ID gives us a single cut. Hope we don't confuse them. So it's cuts, then the ID of the cut. Then we can have user cut. So this is going to be a very interesting product to implement. So let's follow. Add cut as cuts add. We have authentication, that is login. So static const. I prefer to put this at the top, just here. So static const login as auth login. Static const profile, so which is auth me, auth and me. Static const call it refresh, because auth refresh. So static const posts, which is post. Static const post, because post, then the path variable is the ID of that post. Then posts per user should be static. Const user posts as posts user, the path variable as ID of the user. All right, so now let's go set up our API client. All right, so here we are going to create our API client. So it's an abstract class, API client, and let's mark it as at REST API, and we give it a base URL which is from api.base URL, but we first import this API. Okay, and we can create a factory, and this factory is going to be API client that takes in a DO. Okay, as DO, and API client copies that. Let me see if no error. We import DO. What? DO. Okay. All right. So because we want this file to be auto-generated, we need to put path. So we know where it is going to be put. It should come here. And so we say path to be auto-generated with a G. And this API client we will need to import a logger, error logger. So let's import, I think it's retrofit. Retrofit, which one exactly? I think it should be, let me say retrofit. Then not retrofit.dat, it should be retrofit. Then it should be error logger. This one. Okay. Now, having created that, we need to start with our methods. And we call it a post because it's a post. And the path is going to be api.login. And this login is going to return something, but since at this point we don't know it yet, we call a future of type dynamic so that whatever it returns, we can know how to handle. And we call it login, this function, and it will require a login request. So we need to create a model. Okay, let's do it like that. We can go to the login feature. Where is feature? Auth, login. Let's create login request. Login request. We say class login request. And this login request has a string of username and a string of password. So we say constructor login request. This dot username, this dot password, and they are required. Terminate here. So I think instead of positional, let me use named params, and this should be required. Okay, so we can mark this at JSON serializable and factory login request dot from JSON, and this one should have inside is a map of key, string, and value dynamic, and this is the JSON, and we expect this login request from JSON, the JSON. This is to return and should be like that. Map. This is a string. Oh, this is to JSON. String dynamic. And it's to JSON. Okay. Which is going to give us login request to JSON. This. All right, so here we say at body, and the body is going to be login request. Now we go to the service, API service, class, API service. This, we need to create an internal constructor, API service dot this. We name it as internal. Okay. Then let's create an internal singleton instance that is static, final, API service, call it instance equals API service created by the internal constructor. This works, but you can name it as I named the other one to internal. Internal. This one here. We need to have API client. So pet final API client, API client. And the deal, let final deal. Now we need a factory that when you called will give us an instance of this class. That is API service. This we should give us this instance. But then this internal constructor should do for us some work. So we open this brackets. We need to get the deal equals deal. And then we need API client is equals to API client that needs a deal, and this is the deal we've passed. Okay, so this is it for this class. And in case one wants to access any method inside the API client, you will just call this factory API service dot API client. Now let's try to auto-generate the files that need to be auto-generated. So we have this command to run. One issue I've already seen is with the login request. We did not specify where the generated files should be. So this is part, this generate. So I see this request has been generated to JSON and from JSON, but I see an error on the generated API client and it relates to the logger. That means we need to import it here. Import request retrofit, but not this. The other one is error logger, and automatically this should wipe the error and it's gone. So we've set up our retrofit. We want to have a custom response so that any call you make, there is an unexpected structure of the response. So we can create a class here. We call it network response. So it's a class network response. And this class, uppercase R. And this class, we should have, it should be of type T, any type. So because the response can vary, so type T, data response. So we have T can be null, data, and then we have string error, and then we have string extra, then we could have Boolean success. So in the constructor network response, we can have this dot success, this, we can put the rest position, we can have only the Boolean success, then these ones, we can put them into named params. So this dot data, this dot error, this dot extra. Why doing this? Because these can vary depending on the response, whether success or failure, but success is mandatory on every request, which is either is a Boolean, which can be true or false. So we do this. We shall not go beyond this for now. Thank you for watching and kindly subscribe to Code with Kamira. Bye.